Right, good evening everybody. Could you take your seats please? Good evening everyone. Today's meeting of the South West Local Area Committee is open to the public. A warm welcome to all of you today. Thank you for braving up. My name is Councillor Andrew. I'm Chair of the South West Local Area Committee. I'll hand over to the Housekeeping.
Thank you very much. Housekeeping. Please silent if there is. And so it will be the right in the public and subsequent you should act. Those images. Final thing, Luke 1.
We can that colleagues presenting to clearly the echo but at this everybody so
evening. To also
Colin Ross. The door. Cliffwood. services.
This sound. It doesn't matter. We're just going to have. We can't. Microphone. It's going to be formal business. Public question. Writing before. And we will get not but and then annual people keeping where we are community plan. It starts to make your colleague to remember minutes. Exclusion of declaration of the previous.
I'm listening. I have the mic. To a resident, though before, you know,
There's a type. I'm going to send it to this and we'll make. Okay. Plenty of like to invite. Okay. Question I've quick. Mike?
Can you hear me? Noisy. Chair, so
This is the
yes. Partly it's for travel. And several substantial to the objective 3 million. There is 9. All of the area. She doesn't in so because this as possible. That means that local
thank you. Items have that first system generation. Yeah, I'll number those. So the response.
It's a line or undertakings to bus of restriction of what yes assaulted lane meant to be a Several interventions on the corridor, including Cherry Street, Saxon Street and Little London Road, have been delivered already. So, again, that's very briefly. Now, there are other bits of that scheme which don't actually come into our lap, but I shall read them out. Asline Road work is due to start this month, completion the end of March. Pond Hill, very small element now as a developer implements most of what was planned but not deliverable yet. Shoreham Street, segregations, post-COVID restriction data confirmed, segregation scheme is the right approach, still needs to advertise the traffic regulation orders, so work is unlikely to start before April, May this year. The Highfield 20-mile-an-hour scheme, there are objections to the traffic regulation order in December, so there's anticipated a start in January this month. And the next traffic counts and new round of attitudinal surveys will be in spring this year. So that's all to do with the scheme. The cross-city bus and active travel improvements, it's progressing, but it's going through a prolonged tendering exercise, which is meant to be completed in the next 6 months. And there'll be progression will be subject to further statutory consultation relating to traffic regulations order and funding approval from the mayoral combined authority. The Abbey Lane, the highways officers are working through the response to the consultation. Hopefully, in light of the result of the engagement, the current design proposals are being revised. Hopefully, the revised design can be shared soon with members. Again, it's a bit hard to elaborate on that, but none of these have been shelved. They are a lot of them are tied up in the statutory consultation processes that everything has to go through. And unless anybody wants to question or add anything, I think I'll leave it there.
I'll just add to that. Yeah. The council has sent round letters to residents in the Carternell area about the 20-mile-an-hour limit and asking for a response. So that is happening. And this happened before Christmas, so it takes some time to collate the answers to the questions that they've put. But in general, from my own observations and talking to different people on the doorsteps, most seem to be in favour of those 20-mile-an-hour limits. And so Barbara pointed out how long these things do take on the council, but everything is in hand at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I say we'll make sure that Mike Hodgson gets the full reply to the question. Next question is from Paul May. Oh, and sorry, Mr. May, if you could do both your questions.
Do both of them? Yes, I will do. Thanks. Okay, in the last LAC meeting, I asked a question about possibly amending the timings of the traffic lights at the junction of Carternell Road and Ecclesall Road. And you, Councillor Sanger, said he would raise the issue with the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Committee. Can he tell us the views of that committee, please, on that particular point? That's the first question. Secondly, on behalf of some local residents, I've written to Streets Ahead or Amy on behalf of the residents of Dunkeld Road, Bannercross Road and Woodhome Road on a few occasions now, most recently after the last LAC meeting. All the trees on those roads are awaiting an assessment before the dreadful state of the road surfaces can be addressed. The Amy representative for our area said there would be a consultation of all residents on these roads before Christmas. I wrote again just before Christmas asking when that would happen. I've had no reply yet, and it hasn't happened. I wonder if the LAC can ask the same questions of Amy in order to expedite this problem and make life easier for the residents of those roads. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think and this is going to be a bit of a Councillor Masters show. I'm going to let Councillor Barbara Masters answer these two questions.
I'll answer the first one because Shafak knows more about the second, but that's in hand. Right. For the traffic lights, we do continually raise it. We have raised it, and I did it as part of the bus improvements consultation as well, and tried to encourage more people to actually raise it then. And the official response is it has been raised on a number of occasions, most recently through feedback on the South West bus corridor connecting Sheffield scheme, and also through the Hunters Bar Living Streets Group Committee. Officers will take a look at the signal timing to see if there is any chance of altering the intergreen phasing, tying into the existing tactile crossing facilities already at this junction. Although this has not yet been identified as an area for the provision of a signalised crossing as part of the South West bus corridors, there might be opportunities to look at this in the future should funding for a route treatment be made available. And basically the answer from the officers is we want to thank the community for raising this, and we will keep on the record for future implementation. We have not let it drop, believe me, Paul. Thank you. And now it's Shafak, I think.
Okay, Councillor Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you for the second question, Paul. Actually, it's something we as local councillors have been deeply concerned about, the fact that those 3 roads have not been resurfaced. We have visited it several times, spoke to individual residents, and whilst I was very supportive and still am of the tree campaign, it cannot be the case that those streets that campaign vigorously to maintain their trees don't have the roads resurfaced. I'm deeply frustrated. I will take this up now with you take it through the LAC, I will take it up with my next one-to-one briefing with the Chief Exec of the Council, because surely now, whatever survey work is required for those trees, it should have been done. If not, why not? And we need to crack on and actually get those 3 roads resurfaced. We need to do the paths first, and then we can do the road itself, but the condition of the road and the paths are not acceptable when you compare it with other streets. So it's something I will definitely take up, but Andy and colleagues will take up for the LAC, but I will raise with the Chief Executive Council at my next briefing meeting with her. And if I get an answer before Andy, I will send it to you.
Sorry, Councillor Olsen wants to add a word.
Thank you. Yes, so just because it's under the remit of my committee, I thought you might want a little bit more on the issue with the outstanding roads that are outstanding from the trees dispute and why it's taken so long. The roads all should have basically been done 5 years ago, and they are basically being done at a rate of 1 or 2 a year. And I'm very much afraid that it will take more than another year or, before the roads you mentioned are done. The 2 main reasons for it are, firstly, that Amy has been underperforming in general on their contract, and so in terms of the design work that has to go in pre-consultation, that is coming through very slowly. Now, I had Amy before my committee in December to challenge them on their underperformance, and they are heading in the right direction in terms of their improvement plan, and so hopefully they will be up to speed on the measurable performance indicators in terms of servicing and so on, but also in terms of the work they're doing in terms of supporting the work on the resurfacing the outstanding roads. The other issue is that all these roads are going through this independent tree panel, which was set up a few years ago to be a kind of a way of bringing both sides of the dispute that we had in the city together to reach consensus, and that is a fiendishly difficult task that they have. They have made a great deal of progress. They're doing some really good work, and they have made, they agreed a lot of things. But what we are asking them to do as a city and as a city council is really to solve what was a terribly divisive and polarised political dispute in the city by consensus. And so it has taken a long time, and it is still taking, longer than it should. Now, I'm quite happy, and I've said this a number of times, I've said this to the tree inquiry, to have these roads come to my committee for a decision so that it can go ahead. Now, for that to happen, we need the designs from Amy, and B, we need a recommendation from both sides of the tree panel. That hasn't come forward, and the advice I'm getting is don't push it too hard, they will get there. Now, I'm as frustrated as other members on this, but that is where we stand at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I'll say we'll make sure that Paul May gets those answers. Okay, next question is from Shiv Burton. Shiv Burton's not present. Okay. Okay, the next one is from Sue Owen.
Okay. Oh, lost it now. Right. The South West Local Area Committee Community Plan includes encouraging wildflower planting, which is important for increased biodiversity. Can you say what progress has been made in the development of wildflower planting in parks and verges, and whether there's been a reduction in the mowing of verges? And if the decision is made to keep Archer Lane as a pedestrian and cycling path, has the committee considered using some of the space for wildflower planting?
Thank you very much. Councillor Masters, that's you again, is it?
Thank you. Yes. I mean, there are two parts to this, because the original question actually involved the parks as well. So basically, the response from the parks and countryside is parks and countryside continue to look at all opportunities to look at change and encourage biodiversity while trying to balance park users' needs. This has included reducing mowing over 86 hectares of green space over the last 3 years, increasing cut and collect to meadow where possible, investing over 130,000 in new cut and collect equipment, reducing the use of weed killers, in particular glyphosate, stopping the use on permeable surfacing in all land management under parks and countryside, except for where treating invasive species. We continue to add wildflower meadows, although this comes at a cost, encouraging friends organisations to help manage and support with recent great success in locations like Crooks Valley and Mount Pleasant Park, reducing boundary management to encourage naturalisation, creating wildflower corridors, seeking areas to plant trees or to allow naturally scrub, looking at water management, creating catchment ponds, sub-schemes and leaky dams. Unfortunately, our challenge will be resources. Often alternative methods are more expensive with budget pressures that will result in reducing parks and countryside staffing resources budget because of the savings requirement. Now, added to that, which links in with what Sue actually asked, and it's nice to see you again, Sue, we are trying to set up some initiatives in the parks to rewild. We've got one scheme going. To do it naturally without glyphosate actually takes a lot of time from volunteers in the initial stages just to get it self-sustaining. But if anybody wants to know about some initiatives in the local parks, and Carternole Park is close to you, and I'm pretty sure that will be a popular spot, there is a lot of advice. Just ask us about that. Now, when it comes to the wild verges, it's something that I've been pushing for as a standalone policy, but it was incorporated into a verges policy, which has been delayed for all sorts of reasons. You have got a very full answer to this, very full answer, and if anybody wants to see it, but basically it is the wildflowering verges is on hand. It's suitable for isolated pockets of land which is not covered by existing legislation, which is called Section 142 licensing, where people outside their own homes can actually manage and maintain verges. Right? It does require community involvement, it requires consultation, but it is a way of doing it. I have identified at least 10 locations within the ward where this might be suitable. And what's stopping it progressing is the fact that officers have got to do some calculations first, because even when it's volunteer run, there is a cost involved. And it's all to do with the mowing regimes as well. And most of you will have noticed that Amy has relaxed its mowing regime since COVID. If they have any complaint about land being unmown, legally they have to sort of mow it more or less straight away, otherwise they are liable for any accident that ensues. So it is important to get an official policy in place before we can do what most residents want, to see a more natural sort of covering for their verges. Now, the Policy was meant to be decided in December. It was deferred through an oversight. It's going to the committee, which is Joe's committee again, in February, hopefully. Right, it's been beset by serious delays, but believe me, it's not going away. But anybody wants to look at this, well, you'll get the minutes with a very full, detailed account of what's been going on. You've not abandoned it, Sue, and your patch is still on the table, but I'm waiting for the feedback on the others before we can move to the next stage. We've missed the sowing season again, and that's the frustration. You can only sow at certain times of the year. But we've had a trial, and it's been really successful. So let's see what we can do. Thank you.
Councillor Pulek. Thanks, Chair. And sorry, I don't want to make the answer longer, but I just wanted to question the relevance of some of the answer drafted by officers, because it spoke to Crooks Valley Park, which isn't in the LAC area. I think the question was specifically about the LAC community plan and our local area focus on wildflower planting, but the answer given was about wildflower planting not in the LAC area, or some of it at least.
Basically, this was meant to be a standalone ward policy. It was incorporated into the LACs because there is demand across the LACs for wildflowering, rewilding, if you like, whatever term you want to use. And therefore, because there is the demand out there, and because it is part of a wider policy now, and because there is money involved, then really, once the wider trial that we will do it in Ecclesall Ward will be conducted, then it will be rolled out through the wider LAC, so communities can apply to the LAC to actually have sections of their verges rewilded as well. It's got to be a formal process, there's got to be consultation, and it's got to be it doesn't have to be the LAC that funds it, but the requests would go through the LAC, where a lot of these decisions, not decisions, but a lot of requests will be made. Does that answer your question?
Sorry, no, just specifically, you mentioned Crooks Valley Park and Mount
No,
Pleasant,
the Crooks Valley Park was the original question from Sue was in two sections. The first section was about parks. That was what I answered, and that I got read out the parks response. And the second part, which is what Sue
I think, Councillor Masters, I think you've had a long enough reply. I think it was a really good question, and I fully accept that we've not addressed Sue's second question, which is about the closure of Archer Lane. Now, we do have a question about Archer Lane coming up in 5 minutes, so we'll deal with the Archer Lane bit of it. But I think when we see Tanya's presentation, I think if you've read ahead in terms of, or you've looked online, you'll know that this was one of those items where we made a decision in July, and then we've done some work, and as Councillor Masters has said, we've taken it corporately, but Councillor Perek is correct in the sense that we've changed the way we were going to fund it, so we've expanded the scheme to go citywide. Okay, the next question is from Maggie Riley.
You can hold it for me, thank you. I'm sorry I've got my back to most people, so if I stand like this, is that better? Sorry. So I regret that I'm back again, having asked a question at the last local area committee meeting about an urgent review of spending, and I see from the papers that I've got tonight that obviously there's been some consideration of the spending of the £100,000 budget, because there's some information in that paper, so I don't want to take up a lot of time, but on the other hand, I do want to make it clear how unsatisfied I feel, and I'm sure others would share that sense of dissatisfaction, that when I look at, 100 grand is a significant amount of money in the context of where we are with the cost of living crisis. And I know when the community plan was developed originally, we weren't in that situation to the same extent as we are now, and a lot of decisions were made then about investment in things locally that we might now make different decisions on. It kind of reminds me of another situation that's going on in the NHS at the moment that a lot of us are very supportive of, where a decision was made and then suddenly 10% inflation instead of 2% that they were dealing with at the time the decisions that were made. So my questions really are about, I've struggled a lot trying to get an answer to how do you change the decisions that you've made? We seem to trundle along as a kind of democracy that's hindered by the bureaucracy. And it seems to me there's some important questions therefore we've got as a local community. I know that there are friends and neighbours who we live in an affluent area. We struggle sometimes to empathise with that sense of, how hard the cost of living crisis is hitting people. But I know that there are people, we're now talking about the working poor. We're not talking about the feckless, unemployed or other kind of derogatory terms that we used to use in the past. And we had £100,000 worth of money. I've just had a quick look at some of that expenditure, all of which I would have agreed with at the time the decisions were made. But now when I look at it and I see we spent, £5,000 on a speed gun, 19 grand on cycle parking, and another 10 grand on some yellow lines, it feels to me like we ought to have been able to have had a review of that expenditure and said, in the light of what's happening now, you could actually buy 3 decent jobs with 100 grand of money. A job that would have helped with debt advice in some of the social housing areas in our communities. A job that might have helped, you could have supported the credit union, for example, to help people with doorstep lenders that are mithering them to death at the moment. You could spend the money on supporting the food bank with accessing, more volumes of food to make it easier for people to have access to things that would help them more. So my question is really on 3 things about, how do you make those changes if the context changes significantly enough that the priorities that you set have just been overtaken by events? And how can we be reassured that, the questions that we asked last time, we're 3 months down the track from there, that sufficient notice was taken to at least make people pause and think about the money that they were spending? And how can we be sure that we can now get a decision on the budget that makes some of the decisions more rational in the light of the current context?
Thank you very much. Councillor Hobson, do you want to answer some of those points?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for your questions. I mean, I think, can I say, I've got a written response, but before I go into that, can I say that obviously this is thank you for raising these issues. It is something that we care about deeply, I think, across all parties on this committee and on the whole council. And I would say that obviously the council has a cost of living gold command or working group, whatever you want to call it, that is, again, is cross-party and has a number of initiatives which we as a LAC are supporting. And on some of the things you talk about, like the CAB, the advice role, again, that has recently gone through strategy resources with cross-party support, the question of grant aid to CAB and other organisations offering advice. And so that is where those decisions are taken. That's where the larger sums of money are for that sort of thing. And I would encourage you to go to strategy resources or full council with some of these questions, because that is where the greater resources are to answer them. I don't know how much of this text you want.
Well, I mean, I think it's important that Meg Riley will get the full written reply. I mean, it's really important. So I think if you've said enough, I was keen to get through the next few.
Yes, okay. Well, I mean, there are a number of points here, the work the LAC is doing in terms of isolation and loneliness grants, including supporting working places, and there's £9,000 behind that, reaching out to food banks, working with the Greatest Food Bank, support to gypsy and traveller sites in the area, coordinating communication to ensure that most vulnerable people know where to access support and help, and there's a number of other points like that. So I think it is part of our work stream. It is an important part, and I think we are adapting as the year goes on in terms of the resource we're putting into that. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Director Root.
Thank you, Chair. I will just make it a very short comment just to say I appreciate the premise of Maggie's question in terms of, I think what she's asking is in what way are members of the public who give their time to come to these meetings and try to be involved with local decision making, how can that engagement happen on in terms of decisions as to how money is spent. So, and the process has been that the community plan has been devised with full public involvement in as much as people want to and are able to, but the spending of the money has not involved the public, and that's certainly something that I would like us as a committee to look at for future years and future rounds of how we make these decisions.
Okay, Councillor Mohammed.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Maggie, for asking the question. I think to give a very literal answer to your question as well, because obviously you'll remember myself and Councillor Milsom also asked for a review of the budget in the last meeting and were disappointed being told we had to wait until January. For clarity, we've had two closed member meetings since then where I think we've raised the idea of reviewing the budget, particularly when we've identified an underspend in the budget. We've at least £10,000 we've asked to be redistributed to cost of living spending, tackling social isolation spending as well. We got agreement as a committee actually on that, but had to seek legal advice and found out we had to wait until a formal meeting, this meeting, which is a very cumbersome process. I think it's a flaw with the governance of the system, to be honest, that we have to wait until January to review spending when we are not scheduled to spend all the money we have. We found at least £10,000 in budgets that wasn't going to be spent this year. I'm hoping to, in the agenda item today, propose that we put at least £10,000 from the underspend into the cost of living fund. I hope colleagues will agree with me there. I think you're completely right to raise, and I know Ruth made the same point as well, I think you're completely right to raise the fact that it's impossible for members of the public to look at the budget that is for the local people in the local area and review it. There isn't a process for it, and I think that is a flaw with our governance system, and I think it's something that we should look at as a matter of priority as well. But yeah, to specifically answer your question, we are hoping to, I would like to see us review the budget today to move at least another 10% of the budget to tackling the cost of living crisis.
Okay, Councillor Mohammed.
I think you raised the issue around advice centres. I mean, recently at one of the committees I sat on, I think it was finance, that £800,000 a year is given to CAB. That is a lot of money, way beyond the budget of this committee. And one of the things I raised, and I think Councillor Teddy Fox, the leader at Council, the Labour leader, was also an agreement is that we need to now review how CABs function. We accept that during COVID, most of it, all of that service went online for obvious reasons. And the question that's been raised is there are some communities, and may well be in our LAC area as well, that aren't able to or cannot access the online stuff and need stuff. We were trying to get a meeting before Christmas, but obviously the situation in Stannington and the major incident that was declared meant that a lot of Terry's time and my time and other people's time were dedicated to that. Only today I've had a new invite. There is a meeting scheduled in a few weeks' time where myself and Terry and a couple of other councillors will get together to look at how that £800,000 is being spent, and clearly we'll be wanting to make some representations to the CAB itself to see how we can have a slightly change of service. I will challenge you on one thing, the speed gun issue. One of the big issues that I get a lot, and I'm sure other councillors get, is around speeding, road safety around schools. So we as councillors have to juggle with lots of different demands. Ironically today, there's been two questions. One's being asked, the other was going to be asked, and it's going to be asking the polar opposite of each other. So we as councillors have to always make a judgment call. I take Ruth's point about the governance. There is a governance review. I think all political groups have got, is it next week, Sue? 16th, yeah? So the committee system was put in place. There's a governance committee that worked to actually get that up and running. What we said was partway through the year we will have a review. That review has taken place where individual councillors were able to go to drop-in centres, drop-in sessions, We've also been asked if political parties, i.e. the three main parties, could also put submissions in, and no doubt there will be submissions not only about how the town hall functions but also how the LACs functions. And maybe, Chair, we can take some of the comments from there as well to that. Whether we get a situation where everyone can review. Look, I asked Council to review its budget earlier, middle of last year, and because I said there was a huge situation with the budget, that was voted down. So not only sometimes you might be frustrated that here you might not be able to get it, I share your frustrations because there's a bigger budget of 1.2 billion. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I think we've given it a good. A good going over. I'll make sure that Maggie Riley gets that answer. And so there's more detail in terms of the officer response. And clearly, the governance thing, as Councillor Mohammed has said, is ongoing. When the 100,000 was agreed, that was March 21. We then had a referendum. We then had this interim process where we had a year of the LACs without the committees. And now we've had a year of the new system of committees and the LACs. And I think you can see from these questions where it's work in progress and there will be changes. At the moment, can I just say that it is not proposed for there to be that sort of community budget next year. So, we're waiting to hear what the community plan is. We're waiting. We understand the leader of the council has asked officers to draft a paper about the future powers and budgets of LACs, and that will be doing its rounds in the next few months. So I'm sure we'll come back to this sort of set of questions about how we come up with a system which is above board and due process, but is also sufficiently timely and quick on its feet for when situations change. So watch this space. So thank you very much for the question. The next question is from Nita White. Nita White? If she's not here, we'll get a written response. I do need to say a few things about that because I did say I was going to answer that question. So this is going back to the question from Sue Owen. So the Sue Owen question was, when will a decision be made about the closure of Archer Lane? Has the committee considered using some of the space for wildflower planting if it remains as a pedestrian cycling path? So I think the first thing to say is clearly a lot of this affects South LAC, so I'm speaking a little bit out of turn in terms of its colleagues in a different LAC. So the trials will take place for 6 months, the period after which it enables a review of the scheme, and formal decisions will be made around which elements of the trials around Archer Lane and Little London Road should stay in place and which should be removed or changed. Decisions will be based on feedback received through the ETRO, monitoring the traffic flow changes and the funding available, and it's expected the decision will be made by the relevant committee, which is, I guess, Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee in summer 2023. That still doesn't answer Sue's point about wildflower planting, so I think it continues until then and then a decision is taken. So, Councillor Mohammed?
Yeah, Anita's question is, can we get rid of the Archer Lane closure? So that's the dilemma we've got. That you get one resident turn up to this meeting, I think, so tell me if I'm wrong, that possibly wants to look at rewilding that bit of road, and another resident who's not able to come tonight but has written in to say they'd like to see that road reopen. And that's the issue we have sometimes as councillors, that we get differing demands on us, and ultimately I think Andy, we are also going to get a report at the next Strategy and Resources Committee about a review of how low traffic neighbourhoods have gone in Crooks and in Nether Edge, and any lessons that can be learned. And I think a big one is going to be around consultation, i.e. the fact that local councillors, particularly those in Ecclesall, were not told at all, and it was signed off by a cabinet member who clearly didn't represent the area and wasn't even in either our LAC, the South West LAC, or the South LAC. That was a fault of the old cabinet strong leader model.
Okay, the next question is from John Wright.
Thanks. Good evening. I note that in November's full council meeting, Due to a Labour amendment, the Council agreed that local area committees would play a role in developing local renewable energy plans. I also note that in the LAC Community Plan there is a proposal to use up to £5,000 underspend on scoping out capacity for community renewable energy projects. Has there been any progress made on this, and is there a plan to reallocate further funds to this priority area if other items on the plan produce an underspend? What specific scoping work is planned, and what measures are being taken to bring in expert knowledge?
Thank you very much. Another really good question. And I think that the challenge, I'm not going to be completely open and honest here, the challenge is about timescales. So this is a debate we had, so it was a Green Notes in motion and a Labour and Lib Dem amendments, and so a composite motion was agreed. And then that has gone to Transport Regeneration and Climate Committee in December, who have allocated £3.5 million. So just as the previous question, we were talking about 100,000, this is £3.5 million. And clearly, if we're going to spend that level of money, Mr. Wright's absolutely correct. We need to make sure we get proper expert advice. We've got as I say, we've got a quick response from Mark Whitworth, and I'll make sure I get that answer to you. From our point of view as a LAC, we have got an underspend, and therefore we've got £5,000 that we can use towards feasibility studies of schemes. There are a number of schemes that have come to officers, and we are looking at, but we are not, given the need for 7 days written notice, we weren't able to include that answer today. But when we get some more progress, Mr. Wright, we will let you know. But it's something that we will make progress between now and the end of the council year in March. But the £3.5 million is capital, so it's ongoing expenditure, and the council will. It's a really important area where we want more renewable energy schemes. We want more community involvement in those. So it's an area that the council will be working on corporately. But from a South West LAC perspective, we've got a little bit of money to, as seed corn, to start a project or two. So yes, really good question, and we will get back to you. Okay, the next question is from Mike Hodson.
Okay, right. So this question is about the 20-mile-an-hour zone that's been proposed for the Carlton Oval area. I know Roger mentioned this in his answer, but I'm afraid I couldn't hear what you were saying, Roger, so I'll have to ignore that. I found out about this last Friday by finding a poster on a lamppost. I found out about this 20-mile-an-hour zone last Friday when I saw a poster on a lamppost. It had been published on the 1st of December. That's getting on for 5 weeks. I didn't know about it, and I knew that the community plan for this LAC does include a 20-mile-an-hour zone as a priority during this and next year. I didn't know this particular proposal was coming forward. So my question is, why not? Because I regard the LAC as one of my sources of information, and I've had nothing from this local area committee about this at all. So my question is, why not?
Okay.
Secondly,
which of the equitable councillors wants to deal with that? Councillor Masters? Oh. So, do you want to carry on with your questions?
The next question is, I then went to try to find some more information on the council website, to which I had been referred by the poster. It was extremely difficult to find. There was nothing on the main council website apart from a reference to the traffic regulation order, which is already what I'd seen on the poster. And the information that went out to local residents, which is a letter and a map, the letter was entirely uninformative, and the map was virtually unreadable. I had to get a digital copy of the map and blow it up by 200% in order to be able to read anything. So people who were relying on the map coming through the letterbox were not going to get much joy. So I could not find any real information about this. Now, That suggests to me that there is a good lot of communication problems about things like this, whether it's from the Highways Department or the Council's communications team. And one of the points I'd like to make is that according to the government guidance, one of the criteria for a 20-mile-an-hour zone is community consultation and approval. How are the community going to approve of something about which they know virtually nothing? Because they haven't been told about it, particularly if they don't happen to live in the precise area which has been delineated. And the other question I got back from some of my local residents is, why them and not us? What's the criteria on which this area has been delineated? And somebody pointed out they've actually missed a bit anyway, because there's a road which should have been on it and isn't. So I think there's a communications problem here about things like this, which the LAC has to be part of solving. So my question is, what are you going to do about solving it?
Okay, Councillor Masters.
Thanks, Mike. I've had a word with Mike already about this. The simple answer to your first question is, we didn't know, you didn't know. And so basically, sort of Lisa Blake, the senior transport planner, has said, if you would like to be included in correspondence, she's happy to add you to the email. So that's again part of the setup of the LACs. You know, it was well, we just didn't know, full stop. As for the consultation, you're not the only one who's had huge issues with the consultation process. And I believe I'm right in saying that the council has changed the way it consults online. But you're absolutely right. There is a lack in communication, poor communication, a lack of consultation, and hopefully we will be able to sort of help matters moving forward. But that's a simple answer, unless somebody wants to add anything.
Thank you, Barbara. I mean, not to add too much to this, but I mean, clearly the council had a plan to do lots of 20-mile-per-hour schemes, and then they disappeared sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And then in the recent past, in the last 18 months, the council has prioritised doing a lot of these. And not to get too party political, we moved amendments twice to say this is exactly the sort of local scheme that should be dealt by LACs, and our Labour colleagues said no, we need to set the LACs up first and then dissolve. And what we found in the first year of working from a Transport Regeneration and Climate Committee is that we're spending all our time dealing with 20-mile-per-hour schemes rather than dealing with the climate challenge and rather than dealing with the regeneration of the city centre. So I'm hoping that Green colleagues and Lib Dem colleagues and Labour colleagues will all be united in terms of getting some of these local highway schemes to the LACs so that some of Mr Hodgson's concerns about consultation can be addressed in future areas. It's too late for Carlton Knoll, too late for Forward, but there are still a whole set of 20-mile-per-hour zones to be gone through in the next 2 years, and I personally think the LAC should be leading the process. But I'll make sure that Mr Hodgson gets those answers. I'm very sorry colleagues, I've missed the question. The question was from Jill Lancaster. Is Jill here? If not, we'll get an answer in writing. It was to do about the reliability of the 83A bus service, so we'll get you an answer. Okay, I think that completes all of our questions, so thank you very much. As I say, we haven't got any time for any questions that we've not had any notice for. So the next item of very briefly, so that was item 6A. You'll notice it's 6B, and we now record the written responses that everybody gets in the minutes. So we'll try and make sure that happens and gets that on the website. I'm looking at Tanya and John for what sort of a reasonable time, but next 2 or 3 weeks. Okay. Can we accept we're behind schedule already, and that's all my fault. Item 7 is the South West Local Area Committee spend, and that's Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. The finance report, starting on page 23 of the meeting information packs you can view, gives the breakdown of the costs already spent. The first point of this item is for the South West LAC to be asked to note the use of funding which is being spent today, which I'll summarise quickly. On the 14th of July, the LAC was informed of proposed anticipated expenditure for various elements that address the priorities outlined in the South West Community Plan. An overview of the anticipated spending for each priority you can see on table 20, on the table in page 27, which spans over to page 28 as well, in your information packs. And you can see the actual spend decisions plotted against this anticipated spend. As you can see in the report, we currently have 55,155 remaining out of the budget, and the actual surplus for reallocation is 29,419 at this point. We've been proactive in delivering on and developing the actions that were agreed. More detail on progress updates related to the community plan are going to be presented later on in the agenda. Just to summarise a couple of the items, it includes exploring a range of requests to support active travel, an increase in the number of cycle parking stands across the area, working with Keep Britain Tidy as well to purchase a communication campaign to tackle and reduce dog fouling in the area through digital communications on social media, for example, purchasing of Corex boards and vinyl signs to target areas of concern. So the finance report, as I said, gives the breakdown of the costs already spent, and this is to be noted by the committee. Point 2 of the finance report, the South West LAC is also asked to agree the recommendation for the allocation of the underspent budget. You can see the outline, the proposal for this on how to allocate the remaining budget up to the end of March 23. The committee is asked to agree the allocation of underspent to fund grants that will deliver projects and activities by organisations and groups within the area to address the key priorities in the South West Community Plan. So the surplus for reallocation identified and any additional underspend of funds will be added to the South West LAC outstanding balance, and the recommendation is that this will fund grants for organisations and groups to deliver activities and projects that achieve against the key priorities of transport and highways, community and neighbourhood, and local environment. Apologies for that. As outlined in the report, ideas might include environmental projects, such as projects or activities that help those impacted by the cost of living crisis, community green space projects, health and wellbeing activities, and funds could be used, for example, for volunteering expenses, premises hire, food costs for events, equipment costs or longer term solutions. Organisations and groups must be in operation in the South West LAC wards. We may need to limit the amount that is awarded per organisation to ensure that the funds are spread evenly throughout the area. The decision making is proposed to be via the Community Services Manager, first through consultation with ward councillors. An authorisation would be subject to the LAC Chair consultation, and expenditure will be reported to the next LAC meeting in March.
Okay, thank you very much. So, colleagues, so it's very much members, the decision. So questions, comments? I mean, I heard that we got potential amendment, but questions or comments? No, sorry, it's just elected members, this bit. Any questions or comments? So Minesh?
Thanks. I think questions first. Just on the potential reallocation, is there any stipulation on how much might go for different areas of I know it says geographically, but in terms of different groups, I think I'd really welcome something that prioritises more of that on tackling the cost of living crisis, or particularly, I know we've discussed in closed meetings before, particularly on welcoming places and adding to the tackling social isolation fund. I wonder if we could potentially ring fence at least 20 grand of that 29 for that. I guess that's probably an amendment rather than a comment. But.
Tanya, do you want to?
The point made sorry, thank you for that. Councillor. The point that we tried to sort of address in the finance report, that it would be geographically split as fairly as possible more than anything. But I think that, yeah, I take your point. I think that would be something that could definitely be considered.
Okay. Ruth Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question about the spending report, because there's the potential collective traffic regulation order that we did some work on. All members contributed to that, I think. And its actual expenditure to date, £10,000, but I didn't think that had progressed. And I may have had this in a dream, but I don't think so, that actually it's been said that this can't be delivered during this year. Am I correct on that?
Sorry, thank you for that. The traffic regulation order was not achievable for this financial year, but there has been agreement to roll it on for next year.
So the money allocated from this year's budget is no longer needed?
No, sorry, let's be very clear. There is no money at the moment for next year. So this one item, this £10,000 for double yellow lines, so traffic regulatory, is being passed over to next year. So the double yellow lines that we all, as members across the board, prioritised, which we all thought we could do, because it comes back to the answer we've had from quite a few members of the public here. Why is the council, can it not be quicker in terms of its actions? Well, we all agreed priorities based on what we've got from residents. We agreed set priorities. We went to highways and they said they can't do it this year, but they can do it next council year. So this £10,000 is being moved over to next year. It might be, if depending on what the council budget is in March, that might be the only £10,000 that we spend. So we're only really talking about 90,000. 10 of that, 100 is going into next year. We don't know what other monies we get next year. We assume, but we haven't agreed yet, we assume we're going to get ward pots and we assume we're going to get SIL, but there won't be £100,000. So it's just this one item where we've agreed what we're going to do, and Transport and Highways have said they can deliver it next year, but not this year.
Thanks. So just for absolute clarity, relating to this actual report, the column is headed expenditure to date, but there's a reservation against that in that it's not being spent in year, but it's committed. So perhaps the comments could be updated, or something could be included in the minutes to update that item, so it's really clear for the record. Thank you. So thanks for the explanation.
Okay. Shall we go to the amendment then? So we've got a series of if nobody else wants to speak. So, Minesh, do you want to just go through your amendment?
Thank you, Chair. I think, the formal amendment, based on the discussions we've had, the public questions we've had, is to ring-fence a large sum of that surplus, £20,000 maybe, for specifically the cost of living crisis, tackling social isolation, and adding to the funds we've already given to groups working in those areas.
I assume we've got a second for that.
I'll formally second that, thank you.
It's just clarification. The cost of living crisis, we are trying to increase the number of warm places, safe spaces. Now, so it's an all-encompassing term, the cost of living. It's not just related to something very, very specific.
I took it to be a broad term. Okay, any other comments? Councillor Orton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm slightly confused. I thought we just clarified that 10 of the 29 was already allocated into next year. Is that right? So, okay, yeah. So there's 29 to play with, and the allocation is you wanted to allocate 20,000 of that to. So, what I'd like to ask, actually, and it's possibly slightly unfortunate, I don't think we have legal here, do we? The tackling isolation and loneliness is obviously within the local plan priorities and is relevant to cost of living. There are probably potentially uses of that money that would help with cost of living that aren't strictly under the plan. Are we at liberty at this meeting to agree to expand effectively the scope of spending beyond what was originally in the plan to that broader cost of living thing? That's what I'd like to do with that 20,000. If you would accept that as an amendment to the amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that something? Well, I don't know if you have a view as whether we can lawfully do that in terms of governance, or we can attempt it, and legal can always come back to us if they think we can't.
I mean, all I can see is that the recommendation 3 is being written quite carefully by council legal officers about what we can and cannot do. I mean, and so I think as long as they're within the category, those 3 broad categories, then we can wrap cost of living crisis around those 3 categories.
Sorry, I'm just looking at it again. I think there was a reference to the local, to the plan, wasn't there? And being, it's in the body of the report that the disturbance must be. I've lost it now. Well, I mean, okay, but the kind of proposal is that we go beyond the wish we express is that we go beyond what was originally in the local. Use the word local plan because that's the thing we're talking next. Whatever we call the LAC plan, in terms of that spend, is that acceptable?
I mean, my understanding, and I don't want to put words in other people's mouths, but what Minesh has been asking and what you've asked is that whereas before we had a specific item on community and neighbourhoods, what we're saying is that the original splits between transport and highways, local environments and community and neighbourhoods can be more flexible into making sure that money is allocated by March. Is that roughly what people are saying? So, Councillor Mohammed?
Yeah, so, I mean, we can talk numbers. Manesh can say 20, I'll say 21, he'll say 22. But we've got 29 to actually allocate. And given at this moment we don't have anything before us about whether we can carry forward any underspend, for me, and I'm just speaking for myself, I've not consulted my colleagues, will be, for me at least, I'll be comfortable to say, out of the 29, we will prioritise wherever fits into that broad definition of cost of living. However, if other things come through the door, we will look at those, and as ultimately, like we've done for the last 3 months, where we've had those briefings, where we've been able to allocate further monies, I'd be happy to do that. That way, we'll probably address the concerns that you're saying, as opposed to, we've already seen Manesh suggest 15 earlier, now it's gone to 20. I'll suggest, that we have a bit more broad in the sense that there's 29 unallocated. Can we start prioritise the cost of living? And if we get more than 20, what would we do? That way, Chair, would give us some flexibility because the clock is ticking. We're in January. This has got to be out the door and spent by end of March. That doesn't give us a lot of time. I'm just throwing it in to complicate things, but I see
I'm now more confused. I understood what Minesh was saying. Now my colleagues have confused me. Minesh.
Yeah, so just on page 29, it sets out a proposal for using our surpluses full stop. So it wouldn't be that we prioritise 20 and then the 9 has to be reprioritised. It's saying that we would spend the 29 on these activities, which are environmental products, health and wellbeing activities, litter picking groups impacted by the cost of living crisis, and children and young people. What I'm proposing is specifically that 20 of that 29-ish focuses on the cost of living crisis in a broad sense. And then the other 9 will go to that. So it's not that we haven't allocated the 9. The 9 is allocated to those other things, as I'm reading the report.
Okay, I'm now getting confused. Councillor Huggan and then Councillor Ross. And then I'm keen to move.
I was going to say, it sounds more sensible if that's a proposal, Shafak, about the 29. That makes it much clearer. We're going to put the money rather than play around with figures, and then then at the end of the year we've got money that's unallocated still. And I think it's better that we have a broader brush on that so that we can allocate the money. If it's a proposal, I'd second that.
So, Councillor Ross.
Much the same thing. I think by putting figures on it, we overcomplicate things, and we'll come back to the next meeting talking about overspend. I think the body of the report highlights that one of the priorities includes those impacted by the cost of living crisis. So the amendment is that we give priority to projects coming through the door of cost of living crisis without attaching any figures to it, and we don't find ourselves hamstrung by an envelope of spend.
Are you happy
I'm
with
all for making things as simple and straightforward as possible.
I'm minded to agree, but in that, can we actually undertake to scope out some priority work and delivery on that with the utmost urgency, rather than just seeing how it goes as time passes? If we could perhaps arrange ourselves a meeting to look at specific ways in which we can get that money out to where it's needed and be proactive about looking for those places as well.
Okay.
Given Ruth's agreement with me, I absolutely agree with Ruth. Could we add an extra meeting in, Andy, rather than the schedule, where in the next 10 days maybe, Ruth, just get it online, get around the table and look at what we've currently spent, go back to those projects to see if they can spend any more, would be my plea. Look at what the council's doing with its warm spaces, if we can add anything there. I have argued in the past at meetings that sometimes our boundaries, for example, the closest library for Crooks is actually in Walkley, in some bits of Crooks. So, so there's elements of Broomhill. And Fulwood don't have a library because yours is Broomhill as well. So in a sense, there might be some cross-border work in here, but I agree with Ruth, and Ruth agrees with me. So given Tim's seconded that question, I said I'll put it as a formal proposal, seconded by Tim. Could you put it to the vote, Chair?
So as I understand, I'm just trying to clarify it for the public. So recommendation 1 is notes the expenditure against £100,000 budget. So can we agree that? So the discussion has really been about 2 and 3. So agrees that the surplus for reallocation identified in the report is added to the outstanding balance and used to fund grants for organisations. So that's got, if you like, these 2 amendments. So an amendment to say that the priority of that should be cost of living. And we're not putting any numbers on that, but we're saying cost of living, and that we have a members' briefing within the next 2 weeks to check what that can be and scope that up, a specific piece of work. So can we agree that revised recommendation 2? And then recommendation 3 remains the same, and that's that to the extent that it is not covered by existing authority, authorising the community services manager, having first consulted with ward councillors to make these grants. Can we agree that? Thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you to those in the audience, because that was a bit rather detailed. Okay, right. So the next item is.
Sorry, I think we have to agree that. I don't know if it's come under this item, but I wanted to raise, in terms of the 10,000 highways money, whether we can do something about the cafe at Totley Rise have been driven into by a vehicle for a second time now. Whether we can look at using some of that for some protection, whether it's curbs or bollards or whatever it is.
So just to explain that to the public, because it's not clear. So we're back to page 27, and I did ask for questions. Item 1, funding for transport and highway projects in each ward up to £10,000. We've not got any expenditure to date, but we have got a number of projects. Councillor Alton has suggested another item to be added to that list. We will go back to transport and toss that, and we're fairly confident we'll be able to do that. It's just
Thank you.
We have a number of schemes that we've not been able to do because it's back to TROs. It's got to be a scheme that doesn't require TRO. But okay, can we move on, but we'll make sure that's in the minutes. So that was item 7, and then next is item 8, which is, can I invite, it says Gary Dixon from the Planning Service to give a short presentation of the draft Sheffield Plan, or Simon Vincent. And this is the highlight of the meeting. This is the only reason I came, if I'm honest. This is by far the most exciting thing the Council is doing at the moment.
Good evening, everybody. I've met some of you at the drop-in session before the meeting this evening. My name is Simon Vincent. I'm the Strategic Planning Service Manager in the Planning Service. Thanks for inviting us along this evening to talk about Sheffield's new draft plan, the Sheffield Plan. It's been a long time in coming, but we finally got a plan that I think has had unanimous cross-party support, and finally we're out to consultation on that document. Can we move on to the next slide? Thanks. So what I'm going to do very briefly in this presentation is just explain what the draft Sheffield Plan is, how it affects South West Sheffield, and really how you can comment and what happens to your comments once we receive them. And then I'll just finish off by saying what the stages are taking the plan through to adoption in 2024. So the draft Sheffield plan is the statutory local plan for the city. All local authorities are required to produce one. It sets out a vision and framework for the future development of the city and will be used to guide decisions on planning applications. Once it's adopted or finalised, the planning decisions are expected to be taken in accordance with the plan. So it is an important framework in guiding future development in the city. It covers the whole of the city, except the part of the district which is in the Peak District National Park. And it covers the period from 2022 up to 2039. We expect the plan to be adopted in 2024, and it has to look ahead 15 years from that adoption date, which is why it's that rather odd end date of 2039. But the plan does have to be reviewed at least every 5 years, so if it's adopted in 2024, as we anticipate, then it would need to be reviewed again by 2029 at the latest. The new plan will replace what are now the very old documents, the Sheffield Core Strategy from 2009, and some even older policies that were saved when the Core Strategy was adopted from the Unitary Development Plan, which dates back to 1998. So the plan identifies or allocates land to be developed right across the city for a range of different uses, housing, employment, shops in particular. It also identifies where land should be protected from development. So it sets out the greenbelt boundary, it defines open space, and it identifies important wildlife sites that should be protected from development. The plan sets new standards, new requirements for design, particularly around space standards for new homes. It sets out policies that require developers to reduce their carbon emissions in new development. It links very much to the city's transport strategy and sets out ambitions for transport and travel, for better public transport and active travel connections right across the city. And importantly, it secures developer contributions towards community benefits, whether that's things like affordable housing or the provision of infrastructure like schools and health facilities. The plan itself is a very large document, and I apologise for the length of it, but hopefully through the conversations we had before the meeting you get a flavour of what it covers, and I would encourage you to look at the document online as well. There are two main parts to the plan. Part one covers the vision, the spatial strategy, the sub-area policies and the site allocations, so that the plan divides the city into 9 sub-areas. Those sub-areas don't exactly tally with the local area committee areas, and they're really just for convenience of presenting the material in the plan. The map itself can be viewed online and can be viewed with different layers of information turned on and off, so it's much easier to use the map online. The second part of the plan, the other development management policies, which are the policies we typically use to guide decisions on planning applications. There's an Annex A, which provides more detail on the site allocations, setting out conditions that will be attached to development on particular sites. And there's a second annex, Annex B, which sets out the parking guidelines that will apply to different types of development in different parts of the city. There's a key diagram which summarises where the main growth will be, and the policies map, which I've just mentioned, which is really meant to be used digitally online. We have produced the paper maps for the purposes of this consultation, but there is a lot of information on those maps, so being able to turn that information on and off online does make it a lot easier to use. And I think perhaps uniquely, as far as I'm aware, we've produced a glossary for the plan as well. It is a very technical document. There's a lot of legal language. We've tried to make it as accessible as possible by including a glossary which helps the general public understand what the plan is talking about, but also helps us apply the policies consistently when we're dealing with planning applications. Copies of the documents, of all the documents, hard copies, are available in all the libraries in the city and in the council's first point offices. So how does the plan affect South West Sheffield? Well, there are 17 allocated sites within the South West sub-area, providing around 755 new homes. There's a strategic site, Napier Street, Pomona Street, Summerfield Street, SWSO2, which is a large housing site quite near the city centre. And there's a small amount of employment land in the southwest of the city in the Sheaf Valley, a small employment site. I think importantly, and this was a message that came through very strongly when we consulted on the issues and options for the plan 2 years ago, was that people didn't want to see changes to the Greenbelt boundary. So with the exception of one site at North Aerodrome, which is a brownfield site in the Greenbelt, there are no changes to the Greenbelt boundary other than to correct minor anomalies in the boundary. The plan supports the vitality and vibrancy of district centres at Banner Cross, at Broom Hill, Ecclesall Road and London Road, as well as a whole range of local centres across the southwest of the city. It supports the connection of linked green spaces in the Porter Valley, and it promotes a whole range of cycle routes, particularly in the Sheaf Valley, connecting the city centre to Nether Edge. As I say, many of the proposals in there are already in the transport strategy. And it proposes upgrades to the Hope Valley rail line and a mass transit corridor linking the southwest of the city to the city centre. So the mass transit corridors are where we expect to see significant improvements to public transport, cycle routes and pedestrian facilities. Just a word about the neighbourhood planning areas, because the southwest area includes 2 adopted neighbourhood plans. The Sheffield plan has to set out a housing target or housing requirement for those neighbourhood planning areas. The numbers are quite small, particularly for Dore. Really, we're talking about small infill development and mainly sites that have already got planning permission in the Dore area. In the Bebest area, Broom Hill, Broomfield, Endcliffe, Summerfield and Tapton, we're proposing at least 224 homes, and that's largely through the conversion and redevelopment of existing buildings and sites. So no greenfield development in that area. And it includes 187 homes on large sites and 37 homes on small sites with existing planning permission. So the public consultation runs from yesterday through to Monday the 20th of February. And this consultation is perhaps a little bit different to other consultations you may have experienced on a whole range of strategies that the Council produces, in that it's very much governed by government regulations around what people can actually object to. So what we're really asking through this consultation is four questions really. Will the plan meet future development needs, and will it protect the environment? Is it properly justified? So is there sufficient evidence produced to support the plan? Is it deliverable? Will it be effective in delivering the outcomes that we've set out, the objectives we've set out in the plan? And finally, is it consistent with government planning policies which are set out in the National Planning Policy Framework? So it's quite technical in that respect that any representation should be linked to one of those four requirements, those soundness tests is what the government calls them, that are set out on the slide there. Now, after the public consultation, the Council may propose amendments to the plan, but those amendments have to be submitted with the plan to the government, and an independent planning inspector will decide whether those amendments should be made. There will be opportunities as part of that public examination process. There will be a series of public hearings where the inspector will invite objectors or supporters of the plan to come and speak about certain issues. And I'll say a little bit more about the timetable for that in a moment. So the important point to remember is that Council cannot now just alter the plan itself. It has to propose amendments to the plan which are submitted to the government and are considered by an independent planning inspector. So in terms of the steps to finalising the plan, as I say, the consultation runs for 6 weeks and finishes on the 20th of February. We expect that the plan will be submitted to the government around July this year. The government will then appoint an independent planning inspector from the Planning Inspectorate, and the public examination, including the public hearings, starts really as soon as we submit the plan. We expect the public hearings to start in the autumn this year. The inspector then produces a preliminary report, which we expect will be produced around summer 2024. The inspector will almost certainly recommend a series of what are called main modifications to the plan, and those main modifications also have to be the subject of a further round of public consultation before the council can adopt the plan towards the end of next year. So it is a lengthy process, but I think this is a big milestone in getting the plan to this stage. Still a number of steps to go through, but I hope you found the session beforehand useful. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And I'll say, depending on time, we will be breaking into tables, and one of the tables will be discussing the draft Sheffield plan. Okay, item 9, community youth services. Louise Ellison.
To Louise's and end it there.
Good evening. Thanks for asking me here today to give an update of community youth services across the city briefly, but I'll focus on what's happening in the southwest for services for young people. So I'm Louise Ellison. I'm the Universal Youth Services Manager within Community Youth Services. So, thank you. Community Youth Services are made up of 5 different services. So we've got Universal Youth Services, which I'll go on to talk about, as that's what Tanya asked me to talk about. We've got targeted services within Community Youth Services, and that's support for the more vulnerable, marginalised young people across the city. It's one-to-one work, working with young people who are at risk of entering the criminal justice system, at risk of being sexually exploited, and at risk of being criminally exploited in terms of cookering and gangs. We have our IAG service, which stands for Information, Advice and Guidance, and that's worked predominantly with Year 11 pupils and post-16 young people in terms of supporting them into employment, education or training. And again, that's on a one-to-one basis. Oh, sorry, yeah. I was looking up. Youth Voice Service, I'll go into that a bit more in the presentation. I've got an update from our Youth Voice Service here. They can't come tonight because it's the Sheffield Youth Cabinet full Cabinet meeting, second Tuesday of every month, so I'll give a full update on that. And then we have our Performance and Quality Service, which is the backbone, I think, to every service and organisation. It's the finance, the HR bit, the systems bit, the auditing, etc. So, vision for community youth services. Youth services have been around in Sheffield a long time, in different guises. And the youth services stupid back into the council in October 2020 under a different structure. The community youth services structure has now been in operation since the 1st of December, so we're just running with that at the moment. So our vision, as you can see, is to offer safe, creative, ambitious youth services for young people no matter where they live in Sheffield. We want them to have access to safe spaces. We want the workers that we employ and work within the services to be professionals, to be contemporary and have specialist interventions. So we've got a whole training plan planned out for the service to work with young people. We want young people to feel connected, most importantly, to their community. Because you ask young people about what's their community, and you know the answers are very varied, and the young people's understanding of what is a community. You know, them playing football on a Saturday is a community. That team is one of their communities, and it's getting that across to young people. And we want young people in Sheffield to be employment ready. We want young people to have the best chances in life, because obviously they're the future of the city. You have to stop me because I do waffle quite a lot and get carried away. So briefly on universal youth services. So where we are at the moment, in December we appointed 14 new part-time youth workers. So that's 6 12-hour-a-week posts, we're doing math, and 8 10-hour-a-week posts, and they're due to start this week and next week. We've also just been advertising for full-time youth and community workers, so we want to appoint 4 full-time workers. We've currently got 3. We want to then have a full-time youth and community worker for each LAC area. So currently they work north, east and west, so when we have the 7 in post, that'll cover each area. The second day of recruitment is tomorrow, so I'm quite excited about that. So hopefully we'll be able to confirm appointments tomorrow with the candidates, and fingers crossed they only have to give a month's notice, so they can start February half term, fingers crossed. We also want to develop a casual bank where we've got anybody that lives in a local community or citywide that wants to get involved in youth work, wants to support young people, can work for the youth service on an ad hoc basis, or covering annual leave, covering sickness. You know, people that have got a passion and want to just support young people, we'd love to develop that. And then we've also want to start promoting our volunteer opportunities, because, you know, as we all know, volunteers are the backbone to a lot of provision, so we want to get the volunteer opportunities up and running. And then in terms of developing provision, we want to increase the number of sessions across the city, and, well, particularly in the southwest, from a minimum of 1 per ward to 3 per ward. So currently in the southwest we've got 1, but I'll show you where they are in a moment. That doesn't necessarily mean that community youth services will deliver all that. We want to work in partnership with grassroots organisations and develop the infrastructure within the local areas. You know, so, you know, as youth workers, we want to support organisations with resources, with training, with opportunities wider than their local community. We've commissioned speech and language services to ensure that young people are able to communicate effectively, and also around LGBTQ plus work. Can't even say that. Invest in digital inclusivity, because obviously we're where we want to be contemporary and innovative. So young people are really interested in media, so we want to develop that. We've got some young people who've recently developed a film, and you know, that's been on the BBC radio. ITV are interested in doing a segment on it, and that's around sexual harassment. So that's, you know, really gone. So we know young people are interested. And like I've just said, we want to grow provision locally, and we want to increase the range of activities for young people. So we want to, you know, get workers and young people to think outside the box about what they can have access to. I'm going fast. So in the southwest, you'll see that I've made a rookie mistake, and I've got Fulwood and Ecclesfield mixed up. So apologies. So in terms of Crooks and Cross Pool Ward, I've been working with Mubarak, community officer, in terms of identifying sites which we feel would the starting point which would best serve young people in the community. So we're starting. It's going to be Wednesday evenings at Wesley Hall on Crooks. So we're really looking forward to that. Ecclesall, is the Fulwood High Stars football session that's on a Saturday dinner time in partnership with Sheffield United. The Fulwood session is Hallam Community Youth Association. We're going to be doing partnership work with them in running the youth club. And then Doran Totley Ward, we're looking at starting that with detached youth work and profiling the area, identifying what buildings are in the area, what we can use, what young people would like in the area, and developing that provision from a grassroots level with young people. So that's where we are in the southwest. The football one's already started. The Wesley Hall one should start either next week or the week after. The Doran Totley one will be the next week and week after, and the staff have gone through their induction periods, etc., with the Sheffield City Council. And then the Hallam Community Youth Association, we're just not far away from that either, are we, Mubarak? Great. And then just my final slide, I think. Yes. I just want to let you know that what we do with young people and how we plan what we're doing, and it's unique to each youth club. each project, each activity is designed in collaboration with young people. We use the National Youth Agency Curriculum Framework. We plan and deliver it every quarter. Every quarter we send out curriculum plans to all elected members. You will start receiving your curriculum plans. They're on a 3-monthly basis. And that outlines what sessions are planned each week with the young people and what the aims, outputs and impact is for young people. And I'll leave the Youth Voice in update. Is that all right?
Thank you very much, Louise. Right, colleagues, we're clearly running out of time. In terms of item 10, I suggest that we defer that to the next meeting, so we get a report in terms of people keeping well. I know Jo Woodward's not here because she's unwell, so we'll defer that to next time. In terms of item 12, I mean, you can see it's in your pack. We'll bring a revised version to the next meeting. So can we just have the presentation item 11, Transport and Highways, from Tracy Hendry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me today. Just getting used to the equipment. My name's Tracy Hendry. I'm the Road Safety Manager at Sheffield City Council. So I manage the team there that deals with a wide variety of engineering, education, things like school crossing patrols. But I'm just going to keep it very brief today, just to give you a bit of a flavour of the kind of work myself and my counterparts in transport do. As we've already heard, a lot of the initiatives and projects that are happening, councillors have explained a lot about the bus routes, Cardinal 20 miles, Sheep Valley, so I'll bypass those. I'll just start by saying a little bit that we do quite a bit of education within Sheffield, but for South West specifically. At the moment we've delivered 10 out of the 26 schools, an education package which tries to help kids stay safe. We'll go on to the next one, if that's alright. We've also got school crossing patrol wardens. We have vacancies at a couple of locations at the minute that we're trying to fill. So if anyone would like or knows anyone, please do. But we do have locations otherwhere that I can share another time. Next slide, please. The vehicle activation signs. So we've been working very closely with the LACs to try and get these on location. The next few slides will show, and you've got this in your pack as well for further reading, we're on rotation 4 at the minute, going into rotation 5. So we've got Fullwood, and then the next one, Dorn Totley, and Eccles Hall, and Crosspool and Crooks. I think so far that's been a real success, and from that we are gathering a lot of data in terms of traffic counts, what the speed is, and we're exploring different ways in which we can use that to our advantage really, and try and find those locations that need targeted support, which is basically what we're trying to do, is we try to find the areas that need our help the most and then target our resources there to try and reduce collisions and therefore trying to reduce damage to people. Next slide, yeah. Next one, covered that one. So there's an ongoing review speed limit on Red Myers Road. This has been funded by the South West LACs. We are still in the process of getting that in place, and we'll continue to work with the LACs. We are doing a lot of active travel work, low traffic neighbourhoods, which we touch upon and which you'll hear a lot more about in the coming months. And we've got the school streets as well. So Westways on 1 Avenue is going very well. Bradway, the 2-week trial went really well. I think we're getting a lot of support for that. And Dogcroft closure, we are still trying to work with the school to get that in place. Sorry, I'm going at a very pace here. Is that okay? If there's any more information you want on any of this, please, we can get that to you. School streets, the precursor to that is Moorchef Stars. Again, we offer that to every school in Sheffield, not just South West, but every school. So we've got a team working with kids in schools, trying to get them on scooters, bikes, to walk to school and educate them to use all these engineering measures as well. So we're trying to change the behaviour there. And we also offer bikeability in schools, and we've went into those ones on the screen. The small schemes we've got in place at the minute are things like drop curbs. There's quite a lot of work going on in Forge Dam in terms of double yellow lines, and we're also looking at other measures that we can adopt there. We also do things like handrails and small H markings. And then look at the Keep Clear road signs. And next slide, please. And lots of double yellow lines in place. The Crosspool and Philwood, if you go to the next slide, we've got a bit more information on those. So Crosspool, I'll just get my notes. So Crosspool is almost finished. There's a few things on our side, I think admin side, but yeah, everything's in place. And then we've also got Philwood. So Philwood at the minute, you'll see on the next slide, is in prelim design, but we're hoping for consultation on this next month with a bit more detail for you to look at. Additional schemes that we're looking at are in areas for Greystone School, the Abbeydale Lane scheme that we've already spoken about. Next slide, please. And then there's the other schemes that we're speaking to the local area committees about. Yes, yeah. So again, double yellow lines. There's several areas that we're looking at for that in-house. Drop crossings and idling signs that you'll see that the likes have already been talking about. Next slide, please. So that was a very quick overview. I omitted some of the bigger issues as well, as they were already discussed, but I am more than happy to answer any questions via email at a later date. But it was just to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the initiatives that's happening in South West. Is that okay?
Right, thank you very much, Tracy. Right, so just to let you know, so the next public meeting will be on Thursday, the 23rd of March. It will probably be in Forward, but we haven't agreed a venue yet, I don't think. 23rd of March, Thursday. So we're going to close the webcam now and close the formal part of the meeting, and we're now going to move to tables. And I suggest we have half an hour on the tables. So if willing to stop, council has been allocated to tables as an officer to facilitate each table. So thank you very much for your attendance. But I say please stay and get involved in this table work. So it's community plan. Do people want to shout?